January 20th, 2025. Donald Trump's first day back in office. While America celebrated his return, our neighbor to the north was preparing for economic warfare. In less than 72 hours, Trump slapped Canada with a devastating 50% tariff on steel and aluminum. Canada's response? An immediate $22 billion retaliation that's about to make your morning beer, your electric pickup truck, and your clean energy dreams a lot more expensive. This isn't just another trade spat. This is Trade War 2.0, and it's happening right now. The question isn't whether American consumers will pay the price. The question is, did Trump just accidentally hand Canada the keys to America's electric vehicle future? It started with a single executive order. Trump, citing national security concerns, imposed a crushing 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum imports. The justification? Protecting American steel workers and reducing dependence on foreign metals. But Canada wasn't about to roll over. Within hours, Finance Minister Mark Carney stood before Parliament with a declaration that would reshape North American trade. We will match their tariffs dollar for dollar, product for product. The retaliation was surgical and devastating. Canada identified 284 American product categories worth $22 billion in annual trade. EV motors from Tesla's Nevada Gigafactory, beer cans from Ball Corporation's Colorado plants, pickup truck frames from Ford's Michigan assembly lines, all now subject to mirror tariffs. The markets reacted instantly. Ford stock dropped 3.2% in after-hours trading. General Motors fell 2.8%, but the real damage was just beginning to show up in the supply chain. By January 23rd, the numbers were staggering. Cold-rolled steel prices jumped $60 per ton overnight, the biggest single-day increase in 5 years. Aluminum sheet metal hit $3,500 per ton, levels not seen since the pandemic supply chain crisis of 2022. But here's where it gets interesting and expensive. The products getting hit weren't just any exports. Canada had targeted the beating heart of America's industrial future, electric vehicle components. 3 days after the tariffs hit, EV motor prices had surged 12%. To put that in perspective, the electric motor in your average pickup truck just got $1,200 more expensive. Multiply that across Ford's projected 300,000 Lightning units this year, and you're looking at $360 million in additional costs. Tesla, GM, and Ford found themselves in an impossible position. They could either absorb the cost increases, wiping out 70% of their profit margins on electric vehicles, or pass them on to consumers who were already hesitant about EV prices. Industry analysts at J.D. Power calculated the brutal math. Pickup truck prices could rise by $8,000 per unit. That's enough to erase every penny of the $7,500 federal EV tax credit under the Inflation Reduction Act. For American families, this wasn't just about trade policy. This was about the fundamental promise of the clean energy transition, that electric vehicles would become more affordable, not less. But cars weren't the only casualty. Canada's retaliation hit American aluminum exports hard, and nowhere was this more visible than in something as simple as a beer can. Ball Corporation, Crown Holdings, and other packaging giants watched their costs explode. Beer cans, which had been stable at around 4 cents per unit, jumped to 5 cents virtually overnight, a 25% increase that would ripple through every brewery, every distributor, every convenience store in America. Samsung SDI, the Korean battery manufacturer building plants across the American South, issued a stark warning. Their battery separator films and anode foils were caught in the tariff crossfire. The margins in battery manufacturing, already thinner than the foils themselves, were about to get crushed. Mark Carney wasn't just playing defense. The former Bank of Canada governor had a strategy that would turn Trump's tariff weapon into Canada's competitive advantage. Move 1, the $4.8 billion Green Steel Initiative. While Trump was protecting yesterday's steel industry, Canada was building tomorrow's electric arc furnaces powered by Quebec's hydroelectric grid, hydrogen-powered steel mills that would make Canadian steel 60% cleaner than American alternatives by 2030. Every ton of Canadian steel would come with something American steel couldn't offer: a carbon passport, digital tracking that proved its environmental credentials to ESG-conscious buyers in the automotive industry. For companies like Tesla, committed to carbon neutrality, this wasn't just about price, it was about meeting their sustainability targets. Canadian steel was becoming the only choice for manufacturers serious about their climate commitments. Move 2, legal warfare. Canada filed WTO case DS-635, but they weren't going alone. Japan and South Korea, also hit by Trump's steel tariffs, joined forces for a coordinated multilateral response. The message was clear: America's unilateral trade actions would face unified international resistance. Move 3. The domestic trap. Starting July 21st, Canadian law would mandate that all public infrastructure projects use Canadian steel exclusively. No exceptions, no waivers. American companies wanting to bid on Canadian government contracts would need to source their steel from Canadian mills. But here's the brilliant part: Canada also banned Chinese steel that had been re-exported through the United States. Trump's tariffs were supposed to protect American steel from Chinese competition, but they'd accidentally created a loophole that Canada was now closing. By February 1st, the ripple effects were cascading through the North American economy. Modelo, Corona, and Budweiser, all facing the same crisis. Their aluminum cans, many manufactured in the US, from Canadian aluminum, were caught in the tariff crossfire. A six-pack of Corona that cost $8.99 in January was now $11.49. Consumers were paying what economists call the invisible tax, the hidden cost of trade wars that shows up in every shopping cart. Samsung SDI's Georgia Gigafactory, a symbol of America's battery manufacturing renaissance, was hemorrhaging money. The specialized separator films and anode foils they imported from Canada were now 50% more expensive. Project margins that had been tight were now underwater. The numbers were staggering. Industry analysts projected $30 billion in additional costs across the U.S. auto sector. Every electric vehicle built in America would carry an extra $850 tariff burden, a hidden tax that made American EVs less competitive globally. Ford CFO told investors that the company was reassessing its North American supply chain strategy. Translation: they were looking at moving production to Mexico or Canada to avoid the tariff nightmare. But the most devastating impact was on American competitiveness. While U.S. manufacturers struggled with tariff-inflated costs, their Canadian competitors were positioning themselves as the clean, reliable alternative. American firms faced an impossible choice: pay Trump's 50% tariff penalty or pivot to Canadian suppliers who were increasingly offering better terms, cleaner products, and more reliable delivery. Carney's vision was becoming reality. Quebec's massive hydroelectric capacity, enough to power entire cities, was being redirected to steel production. 24-hour steel mills running on clean energy, producing metals with a carbon footprint 60% lower than coal-powered American alternatives. The timing was perfect. The EU's new carbon border tax, set to take effect in 2026, would penalize high-carbon imports. Canadian steel, with its clean energy credentials, would enter Europe duty-free while American steel faced additional penalties. Canada wasn't just defending its market share, it was expanding globally. Clean steel exports to Europe, Japan, and Korea were surging as manufacturers sought to meet increasingly strict environmental standards. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Carney delivered a message that resonated with global leaders: we will not back down, only level up the game. America can choose protection, but the world is choosing performance. Tesla found itself in a bind. The company's commitment to carbon neutrality meant Canadian steel was becoming their only viable option. But Trump's tariffs made that choice expensive, a cost that would ultimately be passed on to American consumers. Canada's carbon passport system was becoming the gold standard. Every ton of steel carried a QR code linking to its complete environmental profile, energy source, carbon footprint, water usage, even the renewable energy certificates backing its production. For automotive executives facing pressure from investors, regulators, and consumers to meet ESG targets, Canadian steel wasn't just an option, it was becoming a necessity. So here we are, 6 months into Trump's second term, facing a fundamental question: who wins this war? American consumers are paying more for everything from beer to pickup trucks. The invisible tax of tariffs has added $1,200 to the average family's annual expenses. The electric vehicle revolution that was supposed to make clean transportation affordable has been derailed by trade war politics. An F-150 Lightning that should cost $57,000 now starts at $65,000. Meanwhile, Canada has used Trump's tariffs as a catalyst for transformation. Their steel industry is cleaner, more efficient, and increasingly dominant in the global market for ESG-compliant materials. The July 21st deadline is approaching. After that date, American companies will be locked out of Canadian government contracts unless they source Canadian steel. The choice is becoming clear: adapt or be left behind. Trump's tariffs were supposed to protect American industry. Instead, they may have accelerated its decline by making American products more expensive while incentivizing competitors to become more efficient. The tariffs have created the exact opposite of their intended effect. If Trump's tariff gamble fails, America won't just lose a trade war, it could lose the electric vehicle race entirely. While American manufacturers struggle with inflated costs, Canadian competitors are capturing market share with cleaner, cheaper, and increasingly superior products. The dream of American energy independence is becoming a nightmare of trade dependence. The question isn't whether tariffs will end, it's whether America's industrial future will survive them. What do you think? Should Trump back down before it's too late? Or is this just the beginning of Trade War 2.0? Drop your take in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the economic warfare reshaping our world, subscribe to Deep State and hit that notification bell. The next trade war is already brewing, and we'll be here to break